Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm well, Haley, and you?
I'm well, thank you. We were just talking about my state of happiness.
Yeah, I want you to elaborate if you would. What are the criteria?
So, the question that you had asked me was like, is the money coming in? And I was like, it's not really like the money's coming in, thank God. Um, but it is also the happiness that I'm feeling and just this moment where I'm just like, man, I'm happy. Like, this is happy. Requires a definition. The money gives comfort, but really it's for me to see who I am now that gives me such joy.
Who are you now?
I'm happy.
No, no,
But yeah, like,
that's circular.
um, who am I now? The person,
What about you? What about you right now makes you happy?
the amount of love that I have,
Hmm.
the amount of love that love is now my primary motivator, my primary currency, which I'm not really comfortable saying love is a currency, but it's just the amount of love that my heart is now full of and is open to more and is radiating more. And it has been a very hard journey because people used to say to me, "Oh, just open your heart." And I would always be like, "What does that even mean? Open your
Hmm.
heart."
Hmm. And now you know?
Now I understand it. And now
Hmm.
I understand what it means to have love in your heart. I understand what it means to love for no other reason than I am you and you are me.
And is that flowing through your counseling, your mentoring?
Oh, man, it is because, again, so happy with the people that I'm working with, so honored. And, you know, it has been a really tough week. I feel like I went through a tough period. And then as I came out of it, now others are going into it. And just to see my wonderful people that I'm on a path with to be facing their shadow, their trauma with such courage and such love, I'm just like, this is amazing.
Is that what people mostly do with you is name their shadow or have you help them identify their shadow?
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people are afraid of shadow, darkness.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's,
Trauma in their lives?
yeah. And I think it's been an interesting journey for me because I did watch, Dr. Gabor Mate has been knocking on my head lately. And
Who is that?
he is what I consider one of the leading medical doctors, psychologists in the field of trauma and
Okay.
really understanding what trauma is. And they've just, I think it's about to be released in some independent theaters. It's a movie called The Wisdom of Trauma. And what they did over the last week, that you could sign up for this week-long workshop where it was you get to watch the movie and then they had conversations that you could join and listen to. And it was all about trauma and how to deal with trauma, what trauma really is, but also highlighting the lack of understanding that there is around trauma. And even though we have, mental health doesn't deal with trauma. It deals
Hmm.
with softening trauma, quietening trauma,
Hmm.
ignoring trauma. So it was what the people that I work with is looking at the trauma. And
And what about yourself? When you were watching the movie and in the discussion, did you go to your own journey or were you focused on clients in your mind?
um, my journey is the way that I can be with clients. So
Hmm.
it's really important for me to look at my journey first and to be able to. What was really important with this was this validation of everything that I did in my journey and I'm doing in my journey with trauma is almost validated and credited by the work that he's doing. And I've never worked with him.
Hmm.
I've seen the work that he's doing. It interests me. A lot of what he says, I'm like, that's true. It resonates with me, but I've never actually worked with him. And to kind of see what he's doing and to see that that's actually what I did and am doing, it's a wonderful validation and accreditation of, and I think it absolutely, fuels up the happiness of you're on the right path.
It's exciting to connect with people that you didn't know about who have come to the same conclusions you have
Isn't that
at,
fascinating?
yeah, in their own world. I did a Zoom presentation over the weekend to the Prime Timers, which is a group of older gay folks in Austin, Texas. And I spoke a lot about the gifts that gay men possess, because it's a theme that
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to get out there as a new discussion. Well, lo and behold, one of the people on the call had written a book about it, and gave me all kinds of references for others who have been talking about it, which shocked me. It embarrassed me that I wasn't familiar, because I read, but I read what people send me often,
Mm-hmm.
asking for a quote or, what do you think? And so uh, I haven't known about these books, or I would have read them, but it was exciting to know and to make contact with, an ongoing contact with somebody who has been thinking and writing about the same thing simultaneously.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, and it really helps me um, give concrete evidence to my belief in the work of the Holy Spirit. You know, Christians talk about the three natures of God, or the three individual persons of God: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Now, we would more likely say parent, right? Christ. But Holy Spirit doesn't get a lot of attention. And Holy Spirit, I think, is, in my mind, is this incredible vibrating energy that's helping us all reach a level of consciousness that we on our own might not reach, but we're open to it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be open to it for it to happen, and we have to ask for it. But when we do ask for it, we find that others have asked too, and then we discover them, and it's like probably climbing a mountain and discovering that other campers have made a fire, you
And
know,
yeah.
where you are going to stop, and and excitedly talking with them half the night, so you barely sleep because you're so thrilled for the validation,
Yeah.
uh, not just of what you're thinking and saying, but the validation of your belief that there's something much bigger than you that's going on in the world. I,
And
I
it's,
love that.
yeah, and I think it's, part of being on this path is that you do have moments where you do question everything that you're doing. And I call
Mhm.
them crises of faith, where it's just like, you're like, maybe I got this wrong. Maybe I'm the one that, like, took the wrong fork at the road.
Right.
So to be
Drank the
able
Kool-Aid.
to
Mhm.
be, and then you pull yourself out of that. But equally as powerful are these moments where you, like you're speaking of, where it's like, I'm on it. I'm doing it. I'm on the
Mhm.
right path. And it really does energize and really boost up the rockets to be like, okay, let's go now. And I
Oh,
realized that I have in my shift before, when I used to see people doing similar things to me, I used to feel very inadequate. Like,
uh,
oh, they're doing it, so I must be on the wrong path because only one person can do it.
right. Right. How
And
am I unique?
yeah, how am I unique? And maybe I'm just, that imposter syndrome comes in.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
now, being able to sit through this, and especially with the work that Gabamata is doing, to look at my journey and be like, hang on, there's no imposter here. I didn't even know about his work until maybe a month ago. And now I'm learning more about his work, and it's stuff that I did 5 years ago.
Hmm.
And it's that very human timeline
Hmm.
of, you're not an imposter. Everything you did is right. The trust in
Hmm.
yourself actually works.
And I think one of the things that we have to be careful for too is that when we see somebody else who is saying the same thing that we're saying, but they've been more successful, in reputation, prestige, money, to not feel inadequate or to compete, because that's, there's only one Hayley Evans who's in the right place at the right time for certain people, right? And this doctor, his name again?
Is Gabor Mate. So it's Gabor, Gabor. And then
Uh-huh.
his last name is Mate, Mate, and the E has an accent on it.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
So to not compete with him any more than, this book I'm working on called On Being Gay and Gray, finding out that there have been other books to say, well, you know what, this is you writing from your perspective in your own style. The guy that I met through the Prime Timers was much more academic than me, much more learned, more schooling, much more reading. But that doesn't mean that, and he's reaching a certain audience. And I'm reaching a different audience. I'm reaching an audience that maybe has trouble reading those books, but relates to everyday experiences. Um, and
I,
so, but another question I had for you is, because I want to understand more and more about how your clairvoyance works. Okay. Do you read energies when we have guests on? Do you get a sense of their energy? And is there color to it? I think you've told me in the past you don't see color.
I
Do
don't,
you?
sometimes I see color, but when it comes to specific humans
Yeah.
and looking at just humans, I see frequency. So almost as if it's like um, music, and you know how you can see music.
Mm-hmm.
I see that around, and then I see where it's super dark or open and flowing. And then if I really want to dig in, then I can see the different colors and that kind of stuff. Um, I'm going to come back to that in a circular way, because one of the things that you mentioned was this feeling of inadequacy when we meet people that are doing similar things, and in your experience, somebody that's already written a book on a similar topic. They do reach a certain population, and I was remember very early on when I used to get really sort of disappointed, and to the point where I'm like, I may as well just go back into banking because clearly they'll have all the help they need. And I used to think to myself, right, there's 7.4 billion people. How would I feel if I was the only one that could help 7.4 billion people? That's a burden.
Yeah.
So clearly there needs to be more than one, more than five, more than 10 people that are doing similar things to reach the people
And
ready to listen to it.
the intersectionality of all the work that we're all doing,
Yeah,
uh, and to be proud of it, of what we're doing on our own,
yeah,
and to try not to compare and compete.
yeah. And I do believe every piece of work that we put out there, every word, every action carries our frequency. It has like the trademark. That's your frequency. And it
Hmm.
resonates with people that are in that sort of resonance, that can
Hmm.
resonate with that frequency. That can be 10 people, that can be a million people. It depends where all of that consciousness is. So it's your words, and I think this is where it comes down to that uniqueness. Each one of our words, each one of our behaviors is so important because they do carry an impact. Every single word action has an impact and has the power to change your life for good and not so good.
Hmm. I think of that when I'm wanting to honk the horn at bad behavior,
Yeah,
and realize that I don't feel any better after honking it. And all the people in the area who had to listen to the horn and not know, is he, who's honking? Are they honking at me? If they're honking at me, I'm upset because I didn't do anything wrong. And you have no idea, the impact you're having with one silly, simple, like returning the grocery cart to where it belongs, and
right.
people watching that.
or pushing it out of the way so nobody like has to push it out the way for you.
Right, right, right.
It's
So do you pick up energy
I
when
do
we
pick
have
up
guests?
the energy. I go as far as allowing myself to get a lay of the land. I read the room.
Hmm.
I can feel out who's feeling comfortable, who's not really comfortable, who's maybe got stuff going on that's outside of the call and they're trying their best to really center on the call, whether it's me, you, or the guest. And then I kind of leave it at that.
Hmm.
Again, um,
I concur.
unless they specifically ask me to look at something, it really is none of my business.
Yeah.
And I do think that you can't, for me at least, in being able to, not only be clairvoyant, it's across all of those: clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, claircognizant. In being that, I can absolutely walk around and being open to feeling absolutely everybody.
Hmm.
Where does that leave me? That's literally I'm not even living at that point because I'm so
Hmm.
in everybody else's energy.
Hmm.
And so I very early on, when I was getting more comfortable with how to exist in this world with what I do, it was a necessity for me to really find that boundary of, it's not that I don't want to help, it's not that it's something where I'm like, I can see something wrong, I have to do something. It's no. Sometimes it's none of my business and I need to be asked to step in.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think it's, for me at least, it really is helpful in keeping my energy up, but also keeping my focus clear.
And besides this phone call that we have, which I find, wonderfully comforting, because we operate on our own. I mean, even with me having Ray in the house and he giving me positive feedback, he's not doing the same work I'm doing. Uh, so do you have people that you check in with on a regular basis?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And that has also been part of my journey towards accepting help,
Hmm.
accepting that I have a divine right to a community, and that part of that divine right is this give and take of, I can support you, you can support me, this receiving and giving. So I, at least once a week, check in with Leah, who is that very much for me, that sort of person who I can be like, sort of just, sometimes celebrating things that I can't really talk about with other people, but also
Hmm.
being able to sit, check in and be like, am I clear? Can you, because I do get to be in the weeds. And I think we all do this, where it's much easier for us to look at other people than to look at ourselves.
Hmm.
So to be able to have that person that is outside, to be able to give that perspective of, yeah, your energy actually is nice and clear. Yep, I can actually feel you. Um,
Hmm.
is really, really helpful. And it's one of the things that I've come to love too about this way of being and connecting with people that are in similar experiences, is being able to have that comfort and that validation and that moment of, you're not alone.
Hmm. That's very important,
Yeah.
regardless of what the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to find a chronic care support group, um, a chronic pain support group for Ray in the area, because I think sitting with other people who are going through the same experiences that no one can understand, but somebody in the same pain, you can try. I have sciatica, but it's not as bad as what he deals with daily, getting out of bed in the morning or after a nap. Couple shifting gears if I can. Is
Yeah.
that your, are those your framed feathers behind you? Or
Yeah.
is that part of the house?
It's part of the house.
Okay. Uh, do they give any meaning to you? I mean, you
Um,
framed yourself in them, and I was wondering, one cannot one cannot miss them,
So
you know.
just a random act because of you.
Yes,
So in coming to this house, and every house has an energy, almost like a person. So even
I agree.
people see me living by myself, I'm like, there's a lot of people here. Don't worry.
Hmm.
There's a lot of
Hmm.
energy here. Um, and one of the beauties about this house, and the reason that I came here, one of the many reasons, was that it has an extra room which I could use as my office and
Hmm.
use for work. So I would have a separation of, okay, this is my workspace, this is my living space, this is my sleeping space. And so it came with a desk, came with everything, but the desk was faced in a way that I was actually looking at these. And
Hmm.
it was a call that we had a couple of weeks ago where you're like, where's all the decorations from the living room? And I was like, no, 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 this is the office. This is what it's going to look like for now. And I looked up and I was like, I should have, why are those in front of me? Shouldn't they be behind me?
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Yeah.
I still get great, because I see them every time I'm on a Zoom call. So I still get to see them. But it's one of those wonderful, magical things about being present with life
Hmm.
is I appreciate the beauty that each house, each piece of land, each room has. And these are peacock feathers. And I always grew up believing that peacock feathers were bad luck.
Bad luck. Oh
Yeah,
yes, I heard too as a child you were not supposed to have bird feathers in the house.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I was always like, I was like, okay, whatever. And then I came into this house, there are peacock feathers everywhere. So I have these. In the other room, there's feathers. In my bedroom, there's a massive vase of peacock feathers.
Mm.
And at the house just over there, there's actually a peacock.
Oh, wow.
So for me to be like, well, hello, peacock,
Yeah, they let you know they're there too.
has been sort of one of those things where I was like, okay, this is actually where I'm supposed to be. Like, this house is actually here right now for me. Like, this is one of those partnerships, that I'm supposed to be here in this house. The house is here for me for this period of time. And may my presence be a blessing to the house as well as may the house be a blessing to me.
We're sort of struggling on the house issue a little bit. We love the house. We've downsized, as you know, you've been here, and we've created a wonderful Zen secret garden.
Sanctuary.
Uh, yeah, it's wonderful. But a realtor friend, told us how much he thought he could sell the house for, which was almost double what we paid. But we have more into it, but not as much as he. So you start thinking, well, should we sell? Because the bubble's not going to last forever. I mean, we're not going to get those kind of prices forever. But where would you go? What do you
Yeah.
do? What is the, so
It only
um,
works out if you go somewhere cheaper.
that's right. And someplace is good meeting other needs. I don't think, you know, the day will come, it'll be too hard to garden, too hard to get out there and cut down bamboo and pick up all the leaves and water every day. I mean, at some point your body just can't do it. That's when older people tend to move into facilities that have gardeners. uh, but it's all stuff you have to keep thinking about as you age. All right. And a friend said, you know what, you ask the question, what's right for today. Don't be thinking
That's
about what's
it.
right for
Yeah.
tomorrow. Yeah, don't even be trying to question what you need tomorrow. Today's today. Going back to the trauma,
Mm-hmm.
um, this same friend that I had coffee with, we were talking about how we can get stuck in our stories. And a lot of us have trauma stories. And those stories can rule our lives because we can present ourselves as victims, right? I was sexually abused, you were ignored. I'm not using I
Yeah.
and we, but different people have different stories. And I suggested to him that I change my story. And it really impacted how my relationship with my past, with my father, and that you can choose to change your story. You're not changing the impact on you that it had at the time, but you can say, you know what, they did the best they could, uh, it didn't help me. It hurt me, but they did the best they could. And they're dead, and I need to move on. I need to live a life that's free from echoes of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Does that resonate?
Absolutely resonates. We are not defined by our past unless we choose to be defined by our past. And it goes back to every day is a day to be you, to define who you are and what you're about and where you're going. Are you there, Brian? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I should
No
have put
worries.
the phone
But
on
every
airplane mode.
day, every moment is a moment of redefinition. We get
Uh-huh.
to choose, who am I going to be today? What values do I want to embody today? Is it consistent with my path? Every moment I get that choice. And like you, I when I mentioned I kind of went through a tough time at the end of sort of May, beginning of June, and now I feel like I came out of that, and now other people are starting to feel their toughness. And within that tough time was my back completely went out, and where
Mm-hmm.
it's paralytic, like I can't
Mm-hmm.
get out of bed,
Mm-hmm.
um, or I can't like even walk because there's no signal to my legs to move. Um, and I understand that that's trauma based because I can have x-rays, I can go to chiropractors. They're like, it's not the sciatica, it's muscular. But I know in my body and in understanding my body, it's completely emotional, a completely traumatic response to being triggered.
Mm-hmm.
So in being able to unwind out of it and having a point of like, enough of this, I can't be paralyzed for 10 days. Because that's how long it usually lasts for. In being able to look at that trauma, and what I keep learning and what keeps being sort of told in different ways to me until I can finally release it, is that when we look at the trauma, when we sit with it, when we heal it, release it, and complete it, it is entirely possible for the trauma to be closed. And then we have to start the journey of retraining our mind that we looked at that, it's healed, it's completed, it's closed. The possibility of that existing again is closed, it does not exist.
And how do you do that? When you are addressing trauma, uh, uh, walk me through the process.
For me, it looks like, what is the trauma? What is it here that is got triggered to
Mm-hmm.
create that kind of pain? And where in me is this belief that I don't deserve anything good, or I'm so hopeless that, and hopeless in a sense of I have no hope, that I just want to give up. And that's what it really is. It's just literally lying on the ground and waiting to die.
Uh,
So I need to look at the trigger for that. And the trigger really at that point was, I grew up in a home where control was very important. And we were told often that once you fail and lose everything and have to crawl back home, then you'll know how important we are.
mm-hmm.
Then you'll know who's got your back. So this totally resonates with that. I'm hitting a point where I have to crawl.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that sign of failure is that I have to call my parents back up and be like, I completely failed. You were right. And I was wrong. And it goes to what we were talking about earlier. I must have missed the sign. I went
Mm-hmm.
down a path that I thought was the right path, but actually you were right and my bad. I have to look at that and look at the trauma of hearing that, the trauma of that, the belief that that's the best I can get, that's all I deserve. And then to sit with that and speak to myself with love, parent myself, and say, no, you deserve better. Everything that you dream of is true. Everything that you're doing, look around at the truth. People find benefit in it. You're changing people's lives. That's what you need to focus on. So I talk to myself because I'm the best person to get myself out of it.
Mhm.
My words, my love is what I'm going to listen to first. And even though we listen to our parents and like that statement is so triggering and paralyzing for me, the only thing that's going to get me out of that is my words. It's not my parents coming to me and saying, "Oh, we were just joking." How could you take
Or
it seriously?
we weren't joking, but we screwed up. We
Yeah,
were wrong. Yeah. And I'm not sure that they will say that.
they would never say that, but that actually wouldn't do anything for the trauma
Hmm.
because the trauma's already there and the trauma's around a different set of words. The only person that can unwind out of that is me sitting with it,
Hmm.
having the courage, because a lot of the time when we're in that trauma response, we just want to run and get away from it because it's so uncomfortable. But
Or confront it. This friend of mine that I met with, Hayley, uh, and was on his way to going to be on his way to see his mother, uh, who he really wants an apology from, but she's in stages of dementia, so she doesn't. And I said to her, you're never going to get from her what you want, but if you go to visit, realizing she's never going to be clearer thinking than she is at that moment, because she's only going to get worse. Take advantage of that time. What is it that you can possibly achieve in that time
yeah,
besides getting an invitation or an apology, rather?
and we have very interesting human systems that we like to prove things to ourselves. And in that case, like he needs to go there and prove to himself that his mother's, he's not going to get that apology.
Mhm.
And then he'll let go of that. We need to, it's just an interesting facet of humanity that we will only believe it when we can prove it. And it's not like we need science, we need to prove it in our experience.
Mhm.
And, in looking at my trauma, it is literally reminding myself of every time I've proved that I'm on the right path. Remember those times. Um, and I think, you mentioned an interesting word there, confront. In my experience and what I see in the work that I do, confronting trauma creates more trauma. Trauma doesn't want to be met with trauma. Trauma just wants love. Gentleness, sitting with it, and giving it love.
So, is psychotherapy then, in your mind, um, confronting trauma?
Psychotherapy is such a big word, it's
Right.
a huge umbrella of different modalities.
Right.
I think that there are, in my experience again, and what I have seen and researched, there are modalities of psychotherapy that are absolutely confronting trauma and creating more trauma. There are modalities within that are ignoring trauma and just medicating it. Medication so you don't remember it, so you're numbed from it. And there are absolutely psychotherapy modalities there that are now going down to that whole root of, okay, what's the trauma? What was it? And also identifying that trauma doesn't just look like sexual abuse. Trauma doesn't just look like a beating. Trauma is verbal. Trauma is sometimes in things that we see.
Mhm. Or
So,
don't.
or don't see, you know? Trauma is truth
Mhm.
or the absence.
Gay kid, gay kids in my generation, didn't see any examples of their lives anywhere around them, and it was traumatizing to not know that there was possibilities to love somebody that you were attracted to, because it's all about sinful acts, not being, not sacred being. And so, I would argue that most gay people, certainly in my generation, grew up traumatized.
I think every single human walking this planet today is traumatized.
They,
Yeah. I think going back to the Romans is when trauma really first started being used as a way of power. we have generations and generations of trauma. So in the work that I do, I don't just see trauma in the person living today. I see trauma in the ancestral line. It's in
Okay.
DNA.
Okay. And they inherit that.
We inherit it. It doesn't mean this is somewhat controversial, but again, in what I've seen and in how I have experienced my life and my healing, just because it's in my DNA and I inherit it doesn't mean that I need to propagate it. So I
Mhm.
can change my DNA. I can look at
Oh,
my
you mean don't have children?
not having children, but also changing my DNA so I'm not carrying that trauma anymore.
Well, how do you change your DNA?
I change my DNA by looking at that trauma and being one to say no more. I will not perpetuate that pattern. So,
Okay.
a scientific study, like what we're talking about, is more energetic. There is Western medical science research that is called epigenetics, where they have proved from as early on as the 1300s that DNA and RNA changes based on emotional states and trauma.
Huh.
So your DNA carries the trauma of your ancestors. It also now has been changed because of the trauma that you went through in this lifetime.
But it also then should carry the joy of my ancestors.
Exactly. Exactly. And we always forget about that.
Uh-huh.
When we talk about trauma, we always go down, oh, we're so broken.
Hmm.
Yeah, but we're also so full of light too.
Light and love and goodness and
And that's what changes, the epigenetics is our emotions. Our environment changes the DNA. So just like chemicals change DNA, emotions are chemicals. So every moment that you choose to be in joy, you are changing your DNA. You are changing the chemical composition of your body to say more of this,
hmm
more happiness. And it does, I mean, this is a very general term. It does get far more complicated when there are chemical imbalances and depression and, those kind of labels, psychosis, that kind of stuff. Again, all trauma based. It can get very complicated, but science is proving today that we can change our DNA, that the DNA changes.
just as this and the DNA changing and the story changing are pretty much on the
Same thing.
same thing, isn't it? I mean, if you decide that you have had enough and you don't want to spend any more time being angry or resentful or hurt about something, uh, and I find that for me, the best way to change the channel is to forgive and send out love
Absolutely.
and move on.
And move on. And moving on looks different too. So just like trauma looks different, moving on looks different too.
Hmm.
Moving on for some people, that's, looking at their whoever inflicted that harm and saying, I can see you in love and I can forgive and I can still hang around you without being triggered. Moving on also means, in my case, that I'm not going back into that. I can look at, my parents with love. I can look at my family with love, and I absolutely send them love. But part of me saying no more is I'm not going to be a part of that situation until until I can see, again proving, until I can see that there's been changes, that now that environment can accept me
Hmm.
and I can accept that environment.
I've had shifting again, which we do. Uh, I've had some interesting experiences. You've encouraged me to be aware of innate gifts, and one of the things that I have been aware of is the sensation that I'm getting um, instruction from the other side. Just really simple stuff like when Ray and I were sitting together, I got the strongest impulse to say, your mom and dad are proud of you. uh, and your brother's very grateful to you. And I said, I really risk telling you this because I don't want you to think like, I can tell you that there's money hidden under Aunt Ellie's mattress because, Aunt Ellie told me so. I don't get those messages, but what I get is, uh, Brian, tell Ray that we're proud of him. And I'll think, oh, yeah, you know, and then and I'll think, no, it's going to sound screwy. Brian, tell Ray that we're proud of him. Okay, all right, all right. I don't know. So, Ray, your folks really want you to know how proud of you they are. And it says, thank you, not like, ooh, maybe I gave you one too many pills this morning. And so he's open to, so I can say to him, sorry, take it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know whether this is just me romanticizing, but the messages feel authentic in the love because it's always about love,
About love.
and how can you, I don't know how a person could get a message from the other side and not have it be about love, because my expectation is that once you transition, that there's enlightenment, that you become aware of truth, and that you're back in the ocean, you're back in the water, you're back in the energy source. And the energy source is, in my mind, is all positive. So if you're getting an impression from the other side, how could it be anything but love?
It isn't. If it is truly from the other side,
Yeah,
it is always in love. If it's anything but love, it is ego. It's not
yeah.
connected to the other side.
The ego of the person who's giving you the message.
Yes. So the ego of the person that is, well, let me clarify there. If we're using your example, right, and here you got a
Mm-hmm.
message of love, definitely a love message, definitely from the other side. It definitely comes in, and you're just like, it's not like you were sitting in your chair pondering, like, what will help Ray feel better right now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll tell him that his parents are proud of him.
Right,
It was never
right,
that. It was just one of those things where you're watching TV and all of a sudden you're like, what?
right,
What's going on? Was that me? Big
right.
message in love. If you're sitting there and you hear that this message of, oh my gosh, that person's just a waste of space, or how could anybody be proud of them? That's not from the other side.
No.
That's completely your ego running through and being overactive and looking for things to work on,
Mm-hmm.
which really comes down to, why are you not feeling safe? And I'm using you very freely here.
Yes.
You're not feeling safe in your body, that you're now looking outside to see what you can fix.
One of the people that was on the call on Sunday talked about the emphasis on raising your own consciousness before you can raise the consciousness of others. And that when we heighten our consciousness, we automatically become reliable vessels of information. But until we do that, until we've done our own work, and uh, for me, it's the story I tell about a kid saying a saint's that thing in the church that the light shines through. We was talking about stained glass windows, but that we smudge the window with our ego.
Mm-hmm.
And if we really work at cleaning the window, then the light's going to shine through us. But we have to keep it clean, and the way we keep it clean is not getting in the way.
Not getting in the way, but also trauma breaks the window.
Trauma
Cracks
breaks
the
the
window.
cracks it.
Cracks the window, breaks the window. You can absolutely get another panel and fix the window so that the light is coming through properly again.
Yeah,
But when you are in a place of trauma, you can't be fully connected. You're fragmented light. You're still,
I
but you're fragmented light.
yeah, I like that. So so the journey really, the hero's journey really does require looking at the trauma in your life.
Absolutely. That's why it's so freaking tough, and that's why only a few people do it. Because it
Hmm.
is tough. And I mean, you've been through the journey. It's tough. There's stuff there that you don't want to look at. There's stuff
Hmm.
you don't want to admit. You don't want to admit that, you know, and let me use better words here. In my journey, I most certainly didn't want to admit that my energy had responsibility and accountability in the situations that I was in, where I was hurt. When you're in that place of trauma, I didn't want to hear, hey, you have some accountability here. That's really tough to hear. That's really tough to take in. So, the hero's journey is realizing first that you are fragmented light, realizing that there is the possibility that you can be complete, whole light, healed light, and choosing to go on that journey.
Hmm.
The higher consciousness is also a journey about unraveling out of trauma to be fully healed, to be whole and complete, returning to the innocence, the essence that you were before the trauma.
In your work of mentoring and guiding, do you see yourself as a window? Do you sometimes think, where did that come from? That's not, I've never had that thought before. I've never.
I do. And I think it's just, in the nature of my work is that I have to be super, super clear that when I'm connecting with the client, I'm not putting in my biases. I'm not putting in my trauma. So
Mhm.
I am very disciplined about making sure that before I connect in with the client, that I'm neutral, that I'm grounded, that I'm 100% clear, my heart is open and full of love before I connect in. When I am channeling and giving messages that are not my words, I do let them know that, once the session starts, these are not my words. And if it is my words, I will clearly say, these are my words, this is my experience. If there are words from the energy that I am not comfortable saying, because I'm translating, I'm getting the energy, translating into English and giving it out in split seconds. So I'm very aware of the words that I'm saying. And there are times where I'm like, do you guys understand that what you're saying? So I will stop talking at that point and be like, 1 second. And I'll have a conversation like, that's a really harsh word, or are you sure you want to use that word? And every time I get that message, get your energy out of this. We know how to handle this. The words that are being used are very specific because this is what will enable the healing. This will
Yeah.
this will able the unlocking. So I will say at that point, I'm not comfortable using this word, but it is your word. Take it. And every time that's happened, it's been an instant unlock. The person's received the word and they're like, no, that totally makes sense.
Uh, and Hayley, the energy that you're channeling, uh, do you just see it as energy, or are there personalities, or?
Their person, so again, usually it looks like frequencies.
Hmm.
So the words I don't hear English words. So you and I are talking. I don't hear Hayley say this. I feel a frequency. I hear a frequency, and then my brain interprets that frequency to a specific English word
Hmm.
or a specific word because there are some times where I will use a different language word that is more applicable or fits that frequency. But the energy giving that
Yeah.
those words has a personality,
Is
has
it always the same personality?
has an essence.
Do you have is it always the same guide for you?
No,
The same personality? No, no.
Nine times out of 10, it's that when I'm having a client session, it is their higher self that I'm connecting into. But there are times where Archangel Michael will be there, and Archangel Michael always has the same essence, regardless of who the client is. Mother Mary, um, there's Sekhmet, different guides for different people, sometimes different animals. But that animal, in my experience, or that guide, always has the same essence, regardless of who the client is. But the way
Okay,
that they speak to the client is different than per client. The words used,
tell,
tone used is different.
you said that you translate, you don't hear English and you translate it into English. What is your feeling about glossolalia, speaking in tongues, people who, uh, in their highest level of prayer, speak what sounds like nonsense?
Uh,
Uh,
Light language is sometimes referred to that. I believe that the language that we use now, English, French, all of the languages that we have on Earth today are a frequency. So the
mm,
words match a frequency, are a sound of that frequency. They're sounds before they're words. Light language, speaking in tongues, that kind of stuff, is very much similar to chanting. It's putting a sound to the frequency. So, in whatever way that comes through for you, go for it, do it.
well, that was all that for a lot of people. Uh, it became an issue of ego because they didn't speak in tongues, so they were jealous of those who did and felt inadequate because they didn't, you know.
I don't believe that there's not, sorry, I correcting my words. There is only one language, love. And nobody's better or worse or the professional, the expert, the only one that can speak love.
Mhm,
Nobody has the power to say you're doing love wrong.
mhm,
Because love is love. We all know what real love is. We
mhm.
all know what ego love is. We all know what love is not.
We know it if we, but we don't often have the opportunity to think about it and to articulate it because depending upon income and education and um, job, raising a bunch of kids, uh, having the time, the luxury to sit and reflect. Uh, Even though the person, you can say, all right, under the right circumstances, I can take this person, put them in a setting so that they, are aware of all of this. Getting them, uh, getting them to that point is a challenge. I mean, they have other concerns all day long.
They may, they may, but love is love. Love is available to everybody. And I had a gypsy teacher very early on in my journey who I was going to her and saying, yeah, like I can't do these things because I'm not at that place. I don't have the resources. I don't have enough to be able to do that. And she said to me, she was like, even the person who has just lost their home and is on the road with nothing towards a refugee camp can stop and have a moment of love. If they can stop and have a moment of love, so can you.
But when you were saying that everyone knows what love is, what came to my mind was the woman who's beaten by her husband, and you say, leave him. And she says, but he loves me. Would we say that she knows what love is?
That's
Um,
love. So I understand what your question is. The language of love is an internal love. So when we look at other people as being love, we are already misguided. So there, the word love doesn't fit in the scenario because it is not truly existing between her and that man. I think that Does she know love? Yes. Because for her to be in that situation of lacking love, what looks like lacking love means that that she has had love at some point to be able to be in a place of lack.
Hmm.
And I would, again, in every awful situation that I have experienced myself, but also in what I have been honored to be a part of in other people's lives, even in some of the worst situations, love has always been available and love has always been there. And I think that's what's really important when you go down the journey of trauma, is that you get to see the truth that love is first something within you. It is not from a human. And even though we go through these most awful, horrific, traumatic experiences, the truth of the matter, we were not alone. We were still surrounded by love in that moment.
Hmm.
That's the healing. To be able to sit there long enough to be able to say there was still love there.
I nevertheless have gratitude every day for having a lifestyle, not being gay, but a lifestyle that allows me time to reflect. And not everybody has time to reflect. And so we're not all we're not all at the same starting point, and the race isn't necessarily fair. Uh, that doesn't mean that our life doesn't have meaning if we don't have the same opportunities as others. But I just, in watching people around me, think, you know, you can, you can say, well, why don't you see this in your own mind? You see it because you've had all these opportunities to see it. What do you think about that?
I think that no matter where we are, no matter what is going on, we have the opportunity.
Yeah.
There's never in every life, whether it is what we consider the most disadvantageous life or the most prestigious life, free will exists. And as long as we're in this human body, we have free will. So when there's free will, the opportunity exists. When I look at those that seem less fortunate than I am, and by that I mean where I can look at something and be like, I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I'm sorry that they're in that position. I always snap myself out of that. Because in me looking at them with those eyes of you don't have an opportunity or life sucks for you, I'm really sorry you're in that position, I am contributing to the energy that is holding them in that place. So every time I see something that I can reflect and say, I'm so blessed, I immediately look at that and say, I wish you happiness.
Hmm.
You have a moment today, regardless of how short it is or what's going on. I hope you have a moment where you can feel freedom and love.
Hmm.
And that is part of me being my personal, you know, manifesto is to be contributing to the world I want to live in, to create the world I want to be a part of. And in that world is a world where everybody has the opportunity. Everybody is aware of the opportunity that they have. So I will always, I hope, and it is my daily endeavor to always see people in the best way that I can see them.
Well, that's a really good distinction because um, when you're an empath and you can pick up uh, where somebody is, how they're feeling, the for me, the first tendency is to feel sorrow
Mm-hmm.
for them. And what you're saying is that we need to be aware of the energy that we're putting out so that we, instead of feeling sorrow need to put out the energy of I wish you
Put out the
uh,
energy of love.
moments of awareness and love.
Yeah. Put out the energy of love.
Hmm.
And it's
Well, isn't sympathy love?
no, sympathy is a much lower vibration.
Yeah.
Sympathy is, I'm so sorry that you're there. It sucks. I can now lower my energy. So if I imagine if I was in that situation with you, this is how I would feel.
Hmm.
That's a much lower frequency than happiness or love.
Hmm. I think it's important for me, just speaking for myself, to lower that frequency and feel what they're feeling so that I, at least as an observer, sharing what I see with others, that I need to be there. I need to be able to be honest about, what is it like? What are they feeling? This is hard. Uh,
It's hard, but within that honesty too is realizing that your it is not your journey. Their
to
their journey is not your journey. So in a way,
Right.
being able to look at something and say that, connect to it and be like, that's hard, that's intense. And I honor that you're in this space right now, but then you have a choice. Are you going to sit there with it? Or are you then going to be like, but I know it gets better? There's the opportunity for this to get better. There's the opportunity for you to have a moment of love today.
Hmm. That's a pretty tough message to give to people who are really feeling generations and generations of oppression.
I don't think it's like you don't sit there and go like and say, buck up, dude, things are going to get better, have a moment of love. This is something that you need to do for yourself. Like, if
Hmm.
you're the empath and you see that somebody is suffering, going and sitting with them in the suffering is now contributing to the suffering. There's now one more person in this suffering. If you can sit and say outside of the suffering and see, I can see what's going on here, let me hold space so that we can now get more people on this side so the suffering no longer has to happen.
Hmm.
If I can get more people to look at that person and see that they are worthy of love and that is love versus sorrow, and who wants to sit with sorrow?
Hmm.
That's how and based on what I see, that's how we continue this pattern, because we are taught that choosing love means feeling pain. You are showing love if you are sitting in sorrow with somebody. You are showing love if you are sitting in the trauma with somebody. You're not showing love. You're saying, let's sit in the trauma and let's perpetuate this trauma. What can you do in that point in time is to say, here's my hand. My hand is here. I'm not going to come and sit with you in that trauma and contribute to the trauma, but my hand is here. When you're ready to take my hand, it's here.
Hmm. I need to think about that one,
It gets
because
super complex because it gets really complex because we can see it at the individual, but then we immediately leap to the macro.
meaning.
Meaning, if you're looking at the issue of Black Lives Matter and looking at the
Hmm.
trauma of what is perpetuated there, the solution is not in the macro. The solution is not looking at the collective trauma, the solution is looking at the individual trauma.
Hmm.
And saying, when somebody is in a place of trauma, take my hand, I can show you out of this. You, the individual, I can help you out of this if you want my help.
Hmm. And that help is what?
Am I a person to listen to you as you speak of your trauma? Perhaps. Am I a person that, if you want the tools, I can offer you tools to now unwind out of that trauma and come back to the essence of you before that trauma at
Hmm.
the individual level? I can do that. Am I a person that can support you through that journey and continually when you have a bad day, say you get to have a bad day, it's going to get better, to offer you hope, to offer you love? I can absolutely be that person.
Mhm.
Can I be that person that will look at you and never ever treat you as a victim? Absolutely. I will
Mhm.
always treat you as an individual person, the essence that you are.
That's good.
It's I feel like it's a soapbox moment, but yeah, it's
No, no, well, I think that, these individual conversations that we have are helpful just in terms of better understanding, how we each approach situations. And I really understand and honor what you're saying there in terms of the distinction between sitting with someone in sorrow and uh, having the experience of, or trying to have the experience of what it's like to be in their situation, uh, but also making your primary motivation uh, not encouraging their upset, but being a source of them to come to a different vibration when
right.
they're ready.
Yeah.
When they're ready, but they have to trust that you have some idea of what they're talking about. They can't come to you using the Black experience. They can't come to you as a white person without them really trusting that you get it. I wouldn't. If I'm going to go to a therapist on, I want, my first choice would be somebody who was gay, because I would feel like I didn't have to fill in the gaps, that they knew exactly what I was talking about.
Why would they know? You're
How
an
would they know?
you're an individual person. How you experience that is uniquely you, so they still gonna have to ask the questions.
Yes, I agree. But if they have no experience with it at all, then, Hayley, what used to happen to me is that I would go to straight therapists and pay them, and they would say, "Thank you so much. You have done me a world of good." I said, well, I'm glad you got it.
I'm glad I paid for your therapy.
I'm glad that I could pay for your raised consciousness on gay issues. Do you
I
understand?
I totally understand, and when we talk about, and I totally understand, and I understand that that is the face of help today. I think where I am and what I'm trying to do is to redefine help,
Mm-hmm.
redefine love, and to redefine truth. So, in trusting me, trust me because in me you see truth.
Mm-hmm.
Truth first. In me you see love first. In me you see you. I'm a mirror. It doesn't mean I've gone through exactly the same experiences. It doesn't mean that I have the same skin color as you. It doesn't mean that I'm the same gender as you. But in me, you can see what is possible for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the connection that I'm going for. And vice versa, because in every single case where I've helped somebody, whether it's through trauma or embrace more love, I've always learned. So I still get to see in them, and then that's where that connection of trust is formed. I have that, I see you as you see me, where, I hate to use equal, but in that point in time, we are light.
Mm-hmm.
And I see you as the individual that I see your heart. And I'm going to love you for your heart.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would hope that that's the world that we're moving to. And I would hope that the help that is now bubbling up is more around that. Tell me your story. Tell me what it was like for you.
Hmm.
Maybe I can help and give you tools, or maybe in just giving you the time and the listening experience, it will help you.
I think, I think that's, the wave of the future, Haley, that you sort of, in terms of help, represent where we need to eventually be. There's so much identity politics. My identity, and it's not something that I wanted, but because of the circumstances of my life, so much of my consciousness is on LGBTQ issues and helping people uh, feel safer and more valued. And so my radar is really out there about, okay, who's a helper here and who's not a helper here, um, uh, and who can I comfortably send somebody to who's going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
uh, but it was a gay man who you know bought me, said, here, I want you to have a session with Hayley, right? So he felt that you spoke to him. And huh?
I'm straight.
Right.
And at least half, not half, maybe 25% of my clients are not straight.
Hmm.
I've never had a non straight experience in my life.
There's always time.
There's always time. And that, is a whole, I feel like we could talk, because that's a whole nother conversation around sexuality from last week. But again, it's what I am proud and honored, and, turning it full circle to why I'm so happy is that I'm so proud to be able to have the courage, to have the faith, to see past all of the labels, to see past all of the broken glass, the fractured light, and go to the heart and sit with the heart and say, tell me, let me sit with you.
That's a good place to end, isn't it? We're over time.
Before we end, I wanted to make sure, how are you?
I'm we're going to record how much longer? I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks.
That's a deflection.
Yeah, no, I'm doing good. We can talk about that maybe, next time. We have some interesting guests coming up, which I'm excited about. And as I become more aware of our firm dates, we'll share those. But I love our time together, Hayley.
We do, and I feel like all of our conversations just help us really expand and push those limits. And I'm very excited to continue the conversation around sexuality too. There's
Yeah,
there.
yeah, let's have a good long one on that.
All right, my dear Brian, it has
All
been
right,
a
hon.
joy as always. Sending you mucho love, and we'll talk.
Thank you. Me too.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.